Welcome team, I'm so excited today because I'm bringing a great old friend, Daniel Mortimer. Mate, thanks so much for having me. I've made the journey out to Orange today, to Mortimer's Wines. For the people that are listening on the audio, if you could picture it, the people watching can see, but if you could picture it, I'm sitting in an old schoolyard. From what year is this?
1866 I opened here. 150 years old, yeah.
150-year-old building at these beautiful wineries that mate, I have great memories when you brought us out here with the Paramount Eels in 2009, but I'm not going to go straight there, mate. I just want to, first of all, thank you, tell you the type of listeners that listen to my show are a lot of coaches, teachers, leaders, business people, but a lot of athletes too. There'll be some young players that want to follow in your footsteps. So we've got a lot to cover.
Cool.
Why we also sit here drinking a nice Shiraz. Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
Mate, I'd love to start with, when I walked through here, before I entered this room, I saw these photos on the wall. Like, your family name, the Mortimer name, in the history of rugby league is massive. And I've walked through and I've seen these pictures of your father, Peter, your uncles, Stephen and Chris. I've seen these Bulldog premierships that so many league tragics will remember how dominant they were. Then I see pictures of you winning a grand final with the Sydney Roosters in 2013. Then I've seen a picture of you winning a prelim final with the Paramount Eels with your good mate Tim Menner on the wall. So, mate, there's so many memories just walking through there before I've even got into this room. What were your childhood memories? Because did you tell me that you were born the year after your dad retired?
Yeah, correct. So 89 I was born. Dad finished in 88. So, yeah, despite not living through Dad's career, I felt like I did. I grew up on all the old tapes with my brothers. We loved the old VHS tapes of Dad and that team. We were all avid Bulldogs fans, obviously, and grew up watching the tapes and felt like, when older people come through and they talk about the games and the years, I felt like I can contribute to the conversation, but I wasn't even born. It was it's funny feeling like I grew up in the 80s, having grown up on the tapes, but born 89. So yeah, I was a little bit late to be in the photos with Dad, but definitely feel like I was there.
Because there's a great photo of your father holding two of your brothers.
Two of my oldest brothers, yeah, Michael and James.
After the grand final, okay.
Yeah. So
when you say you grew up on the tapes, that's so you were studying games without you just thinking I'm watching Dad, but in the back of your mind there's some good influence going on when you're watching film as a young kid. What do you remember about that team? Who, besides your father, who was your favourite player?
Yeah, well, I mean, growing up as one of five boys, you're just born into the game, into the love of it straight away. I can't remember when I first loved it or when I first watched it, but you're just born into it. Growing up on the tapes, obviously, Steve was my hero as a young kid. Watching his cover tackles and his chip and chases and his speed off the mark. Once again, I was one of five boys and probably the smallest. Well, I am the smallest of all five brothers. So, Steve was small and nifty and quick but just tough as nails. And he was my first, idol growing up. A first of many, but the first idol that I watched and wanted to replicate.
We share the same idol.
Yeah.
When I grew up, I loved Steve Mortimer, and I met him only a couple of years ago. He came into the Origin camp. We were staying in Coogee, and he walked into the surf club where the boys were, and I had a little fanboy moment when he walked in. I said, I've got to have a photo with this guy, and I made sure I told him too. Yeah. I loved watching him play. Yeah. And Terry Lamb.
Yeah.
I love watching Terry Lamb.
Yeah, it's Steve. It's lovely hearing those old stories because Steve's quite unwell now with his dementia battle. It is lovely being in not just the footy environment but at the winery, and you often come again across people who have got great old Steve stories or dad or my uncles, and it's nice to relive that and get a little glimpse into their lives and the way they affected other people because Steve's quite unwell at the moment, so it's nice to relive those memories of him in his prime.
Well, thoughts going out to Steve and his family. It was his son that brought him in. that day.
Yeah, Andrew. Yeah,
Andrew. Yeah. Well, thoughts go out to them, mate. What about after that? You said Steve was one of many idols. As it started to get a bit more serious, like you were just you're born into the game, but when did you start to really think I'm going to have a good crack at this?
Yeah, look, I was sort of look, it's all I ever wanted to do for as long as I knew. So there was no backup plan really. It was just it's all I knew that I ever wanted to do. So I lived it and breathed it, and luckily I had 4 other brothers who did as well. So it was probably training, but we didn't see it as training. We'd be out till 8:30 in the summer playing footy out the front. So yeah, I got a very wholesome introduction to rugby league, the life, and through Dad getting to go up and go into Bulldog sheds and stuff like that. Getting exposed to stuff that normal kids don't get to. That just fueled the fire even more.
Yeah.
So I got a number. I loved probably Braith was my favourite Bulldogs player when I was young, and got to play with him at the Roosters for 1 year. But look, Stacey Jones was my favourite player growing up. Once again, a little halfback who just the little general they called him, and he could just lead a team. He was tough, and there was a year I think it was 2002 when he played the grand final against the Roosters and scored that try in the grand final. And from then on, I was just like, this is my guy. Stacey Jones was definitely my hero, and I got to play against him once, which was one of the highlights of my career.
2009, Parramatta Eels, you played against Stacey Jones.
I did, yeah.
At Parramatta Stadium. Yep,
he came back from, he had a hiatus, went over to England for a year, I think France for a year in 2008, and then got the SOS call from the Warriors in 2009. So I thought my chance had gone, but he pulled on the boots for 1 more year, and there I was getting to line up against him, which was amazing.
Well, we've jumped straight to 2009, which I do need to go back about, like some other influence you may have had and how you found yourself at Parramatta Eels, but we'll stick on 2009 for a minute there. You mentioned playing against Stacey Jones, but the run you had when you came into that Parramatta Eels team, like, it's hard if you go back and watch the highlights again, it's unbelievable, that little run. And I know we just had your good friend Tim Menner on this podcast recently, and we talked about some other players besides Hainsey. And, I even copped a few comments here and there about like Hainsey supporters thinking that Tim was discrediting him,
Yeah.
But he actually wasn't. We all love Hainsey,
yeah,
and we all love what he did.
Yeah.
But Tim was just talking about Fooey and the influence Fooey had on him. So, but yeah, that year it wasn't just Hainsey. You played out of your skin. I remember you debuted in Cronulla. The following week, Newcastle, and then we went on a run. You set up a nice little try for Fooey Moi that day. You were on fire, Hainsey was on fire, Folletti was on fire, Luke Burt had a crack of a year, led by Hindy, Kalis. You tell me your memories of that year. Can you share that? Because I still want to, I want to talk about how you ended up at the Eels when you're such a Bulldogs man.
Yeah.
But what were your memories of that run? Because it was a horrible start to the year, but all you basically knew was winning. Yeah,
well, it sort of started off. I was working at Rebel Sport. I remember I got the call from Phil Moss saying at the start of the year, about January, saying, Dean Anderson wants you to, he says it's up to you if you want to come train, because I think that way they got around actually paying you a first grade wage, so it was optional.
Do you want to come and...
Yeah, so it was an obvious answer to that one, but I remember that, smile ear to ear, and then getting to train all that sort of first half of the year with first grade, on top of training 20s in the afternoon, and then I worked at a pub most nights, so it was a lot to take on. But once again, when you know it's all you want to do, you just do it. So trained for the first 6 weeks, and then had a few injuries, to halves going into that year. I know Finchy left early in that year. Even 12 months before that, Tim Smith had gone, Trent Hodgkinson had gone, Chris Keating got injured, James Maloney had gone, so I was sort of the Stephen Bradbury of Parramatta there for a while. And in the middle of the year, Chris Keating and Folletti Mateo, who against Manly, I think they both got injured in the same game. Eels weren't travelling well at that stage anyway. I think I was sitting about 14th, and then there's Jeff Robson and myself sort of just sitting there waiting for opportunities, and we both took them. And my debut against Sharks, we lost. Sharks were on a 14-game losing streak, and we broke their losing streak. So everyone else within the sheds was absolutely devastated, but I still had a smile from ear to ear from making my debut.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a moment in that first game, just defending sort of middle of the first half, and I could just come back and seeing Hindy as my back rower, and having Inu outside of me, just thinking, like, wow, this is it. I've done it. That's what sort of thing you just want to play. One game is all just to tick that whole childhood dream off. Anything else was a bonus. So that was an amazing moment. And then from the week after, went up and played Newcastle, and I had a really decent game. I'd set up the winning try, and then got man of the match. And then I remember that game going into the sheds, checking my phone, because I was like, oh, surely, like, I've got some messages of people, and there was 2 messages, and I was a bit devo. But there was 2 matches of the game, and I forgot back then it was an hour delayed, so 3 o'clock game wasn't played till 4 o'clock. So we got changed, got on the bus. I totally forgot. Then about 20 minutes from the bus ride, my phone ran hot, and so that was a good feeling too. And then look, the rest of the year, things just clicked. And we went on this amazing run and just really put teams to the sword, developed this confidence in each other, and this style of footy that just suited us to a T.
Yeah.
And look, Hainsey, I've never seen a patch of form like it. You watch the videos and everyone was just playing out of their skin. The confidence was high, motivation was higher, and it was a hell of a run.
Great memories you just brought up. Even when you're mentioning, like, Jeff Robson, like you two in the halves, like we said, Hainsey gets a lot of the credit, but you also played out of your skin. Like, make no mistake, the impact you made when you came into that team brought so much energy, not just in games but also in training. But you just mentioned even Jeff Robson. Like, talk about, like, we're talking about famous halfbacks, grand final halfbacks like that. I remember there was a stage that year where he didn't get let in the car park because the security didn't know who he was. And he's like, I'm about to play the game. If you don't let me in, the game doesn't start. But by the end of the year, you guys are playing in the grand final. It's an incredible story. But like I say, don't underestimate what you brought. For the listeners that are wondering what the connection is there, not realising that I was on that staff when you came in, the first impression you gave us was, this is the character we want in this team. And I told the story to Tim Manor last week. We brought up some great memories where we jumped in the boxing ring once, and there's a world-class boxer who was told to put pressure on you and just see how you would respond. And he got out of that boxing ring and said to me, you have to have him in the team. You hadn't played yet. No. He said, you have to have this kid in your team just because of his character. Not because of your boxing skill, but because of the character. And you just wouldn't take a backward step, and you brought so much energy and competitiveness, and that's how you played. And you talk to any of your teammates since, that's how they describe you too, that they just want you in their team, you know. So don't underestimate. Hainsey, if you're listening, yes, you did well, but so did you, mate. So did you. So I might stick on that character piece there and go back a bit. Any coaches, teachers, trainers, anyone that influenced you along the way, besides obviously the family?
Yeah, obviously, Dad was the biggest contributor to that. And I think being one of 5 boys, I mean, you got to learn to fight for your place in the family, let alone the world. So that competitive nature, I think, just it was part of your environment from day dot. So being down the food chain a little in the family, you have to fight for your right to be there, and those characteristics or traits developed pretty early, I think. But everyone still calls me a competitive little bastard, the brothers. So I definitely got that competitive streak, and I see my little girl now who's 5, and you verse her in anything, and you don't want to beat her because she'll kill the sting. So she's got it too. But,
awesome.
But I had a number of coaches who played a big part of my junior. My first coach, Martin Power, and Dad and my uncle coached me for a bit, and Kevin Grimshaw chose me for a rep side, which then led the whole chain of events.
Okay.
To get picked up. Cole Matthews picked me up for the RAS, where Rocket Ready picked me up for Parramatta. So
is that
one of those. Yeah, so one of those little. There was one. So the game that changed my life was a Western Division game where I was injured for the trials, so I'd sort of just missed the trial. But then Kevin Grimshaw, the coach, took a big punt. I was a year younger as well, and out of the two teams that trialled, selected me at 5'8" anyway, because he'd seen me play previously, and he copped a lot of stick for it.
Right.
But he'd seen me before and wanted me in that team. So despite missing the trials, he selected me straight in that Western Division team. And then where we had a trial, went on and our country Western Division team ended up going on to become state champions. So we sort of repaid the faith in him. But from one of those trials, I just had one of those games where just everything went right. I would have been about 16, I think. And
awesome. And then you mentioned Rod Reddy.
Yeah, and then
the AIS had a program, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. So there was a bloke from Mudgee called Cole Matthews who walked over me after that game and had a chat and invited me down to the AIS to spend all my holidays training in the Rugby League camp at the AIS. And then Rod Reddy was one of the trainers down there who used to come down in the holidays and a lot of great players came out of that. He was
working at the Eels at the time,
and picked me up from there and invited me to the Eels for a pre-season trial, and I had another cracking game and just sort of like one of those chain of events that just I hit a bit of a patch of form, and I was still 16 out here unsigned, and a lot of other people getting signed around you, and you felt like you're being a bit hard done by, but just had to keep my head down and bide my time, and it came, and when it did, it came fast. I sort of left school. I was in year 12 sort of unsigned, and then 18 months later I was playing a grand final. So it was one of those sort of stories where you just pursue and keep at it, and to a bigger extent, someone like Jeff Robson, who was 25 at the time, he'd played 2 NRL games, and then stuck it out, and then he was my halves partner. I think we're still the most inexperienced halves pairing in a grand final. Of about 30 games. So great memories and just. Got rewarded in the end for sticking it out. After some there's a lot of tough times in there, but you don't remember those. Yeah,
well, so my memory was Rocket would come back and talk about you a lot, talk about the character bit. So there's always a first impression you give people. Then I remember when you came in and there was some fitness tests going on, and it was you trying to beat Luke Burt. Like Luke Burt was the one always winning, and I think you beat him in the yo-yo test. And I remember the whole team, all these senior players, just standing on the sideline cheering you, like thinking, "Wow, we want this kid," So, no, well done, mate, on that. And then let's jump a few years now, and you end up at the Sydney Roosters. Let's talk about the Roosters as a club. Describe that club for me.
Yeah, look, just. All the way from Nick Politis, he's been the heart and soul of that club, and everyone's got an opinion of Nick and that. But anyone who's been at the Roosters, I think, can't talk highly enough about him. He's one of those guys. A lot of power, a lot of money, but just lives and breathes footy most. And if you're a Rooster for one day, you're a Rooster for life in his eyes. He's so it's very well led, and what you need at a club is a good leader, and no doubt the club has that in Nick. And they'll probably need to build him a statue or something. Because his influence on the club going 50 years now has been unmatched, I think, in rugby league. And then I had my first year under Brian Smith, got me to the Roosters. Sort of some disappointing finish to Parramatta, and I was went through a bit of a tough time, particularly in 2011 when Steve Kearney came in and made it quite well known that I wasn't in his future plans, which is okay because that's a coach has got to live and die by their decisions. But pretty dejected, and after committing back to that club when I had a good offer from the Bulldogs as well, and pretty dejected, and then Brian Smith had seen enough of me to give me a crack at the Roosters, and then funny enough that following my first year there, played about 50-50 first grade for the Roosters, and then really enjoyable stint at the Newtown Jets too, which was the feeder, which we won the competition that year. So shout out to the Jets. It was a fantastic fantastic club that really brought my love back for the game in a time that I needed it.
That's good.
And then, Trent Robinson came in 2013, and my first meeting with Trent, actually, face-to-face, was asking for a release, believe it or not. So I had played about 50-50 of the year in 2012, and then John Cartwright at the Titans came calling. They had some injury crisis in the halves, and he came knocking. And I thought when Trent Robinson first signed, I didn't know much about him at all. No one did.
Yeah.
And we had the first orientation day, and I said, I'll get him on the second day. And so I went to his office and I said, look, Robbo, I've asked for a release. I'd love to take it, expecting a handshake and walking out the door. And he just said, no, flat no.
Not getting it.
Yeah, and he just said, he said, I don't know you. I know you don't know a lot about me, but I've seen you, and I want you in my team. And so while I'm here, you're not going anywhere. So that was a really sort of defining moment in my career, because after being dejected at the Eels and not getting the run I wanted previously, it's just to walk out of that office without having even played a game, just feeling that belief from the coach again, feeling valued. And I walked out with a stride on my step, and we had the fitness that day, and I went out and won everything. I was just pumped. You did. Yeah. But I thought, right, well, here's my chance again, to make it a guy who already has belief in me. Now I've got to repay that faith. And 2013, I was one of only 4 players to play every single game, including grand final. So that pivotal moment where you just, once again, you stick in there and you got to ride it out, and good things happen.
I never knew that, one of only 4 players.
Yeah.
Because, geez, on the photo when you walk in, or you just walk into it's so full of history, that great club. Like, you walk in the museum and you see all those photos of that year. There's some great names in that team.
Yeah, it was
and you were one of only 4 that played every single game.
Yeah, we missed a few through Origin. So but look, it was just, and funny enough, like Brian Smith did all the recruiting for that team, and then got let go. So Trent inherited a pretty good team with Sonny Bill, Michael Jennings, James Maloney coming in, and already a very good, Minicello, Piercy. Like it was a pretty good team, but there was still a lot of work to do.
Who was the besides yourself, because you would go and win everything? Who was the best trainer of that team that really set the standards? Because something happens in premiership teams. Like, it starts.
Yeah.
There's stuff that happens in November that allows you to win the following October.
Yeah.
Who have you got? What story can you tell me about a player that you remember?
Yeah,
for their work or what they contributed?
Anthony Minicello was no doubt the leader of the pack, and I think early in the pre-season, Robbo made it known that he wasn't going to select a captain until January, I think, mid-January. So gave the boys all pre-season to sort of, boys who were feeding, to put their hand up for it. And Sonny's a tremendous trainer, but Minnie just led everything on and off the field. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that he was the right leader for that year. Probably the front runner anyway, but just went ahead in terms of his leadership. Yeah, like just not his training, very and not necessarily going balls out winning everything, but first in he's doing all his plyometrics, because he'd just come through his back injuries, and so he was an out and out professional in everything: his diet, his training, his recovery. I mean, so he really set the tone for that year in like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. Like, come with me, boys, and we did. Yeah. So
talk to me about Sonny Bill Williams, like that. You think about some of the greatest athletes ever, and you had a season with him. NRL premierships, World Cups, for the All Blacks, boxing, like one of the greats.
Yeah.
You tell me what it was like what you remember of him, and any lessons that you learned from him, that if there's a young player, a young athlete out there listening, maybe learning just from listening to you talk about Sonny.
Yeah, well, he's another one. As a Bulldogs player, around 2004, when I was 10, he was another idol of mine who I had photos with when I was 10 or 12. But it's just a circus. I've never seen anything like it. What follows, particularly coming back to Rugby League that year, and it was just crazy. He's bigger than the game. It was the following and the attention.
Yeah.
But having gone from that young fella who's made some mistakes and sort of left the game in a bad way. He won everyone over so damn quickly. He was just you could see, he wasn't back for anything but to win a competition and to lead, and particularly with the young Islander boys. Roosters had some impressionable young Islanders, Isaac Liu, Daniel Tupou, a couple of young Islander boys, Tupanua, who were coming through, but started to see his leadership, and Sonny would come before training and do his plyo, and then this next week he'd have company, and then the following week, and it was a lot of those Islander boys who obviously got in his ear, and he mentored them, and his group just slowly grew and grew and grew, and so without Trent really having to lead that, which he did, you had blokes like Minicello and Sonny who led that from the players, and that's more influential, I think, than what any coach can tell you to do. When you attach yourself to a player like one of those two, you know that the culture is going to be rock solid, and those two definitely led that.
Hey, there's some gold in that.
Yeah.
Like, what you've just said there is, you lived it, you felt it, but other people that have lived it, felt it, or coached it, or even if you're going to read it in a book somewhere, when a culture is player-led, that's powerful.
Yeah.
So, like you say, there's a lot of staff that they all have their job to do, and they all have to lead in their own way certain values within the club. But when it's player-led, that's when it's powerful. And you've just mentioned a couple of players there that there's something in that. Any young players out there listening that want to go and win a premiership, do not forget that when it's player-led, that's where the power is. That's where the magic is.
Yeah, and don't sit back and I know most players, including myself, when you're older, you love the opportunity to take a young fella under your wing and so lean on what's around, because you won't get any better mentors than blokes playing with you or the level above you. Just take every opportunity to learn, because like you said, that's once it develops that belief in a team, and the more you have time together, and the more you even though it's not physical benefits, it's that mental benefits of we've done a little bit more this week. Let's keep it going. And that was definitely a year where I felt like we trained a lot smarter, not harder. It's probably one of my easiest pre-seasons I've done physically.
You're right.
Very early on, Robbo said, having come from Parramatta, where we did, sand dunes and hill sprints and all that sort of stuff. Sort of day one at the Roosters, it was sort of like, well, if we don't do it on a field, we're not going to waste time doing it. So everything was so specific, game specific. So we'd do conditioning, but it'd be straight back into a pose or wrestling or something like that. So it was one of those really enjoyable pre-seasons where you felt like you were getting better at your trade by replicating what you're doing on the field. And that was a massive lesson for me going forward. It's not necessarily harder. You've got to flog yourself to get better. It's not the case.
Whereas if you looked back at your time at Para, 09 would have felt like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the pre-seasons because I know I was there. Whereas 11 would have felt different. 11 would have felt a lot different.
Yeah, well, I remember we did the hills and the sand. I remember round one, and we had about 5 blows out with shin splints. So
that was 11,
and we tapered it off quite quickly. So it's funny. The older I got, the easier they become. Not just because I was slowly getting those old boys crew to get to doctor sessions, but the science and the smarts around training, specific training was better, and it became a lot more enjoyable.
So then you went. Oh no, we've got to stick on the Roosters for a little bit more. Grand final preparation. Like some people say, just another game, but it's not.
No, far from it, yeah.
So, do you remember your mindset going into a big game like that? Or was there any little focus that you ever had to keep it nice and simple while also sprinkling a level of hunger and intensity that's required?
Yeah, it's a really tough one because you've got the biggest game of your life ahead, but you've got this whole week of getting paraded around and losing that nervous energy. And thankfully, I'd been through it with Parramatta, and and we rode it. We enjoyed it, but it did. I think it did take it out on the day. We were behind about, I think, 18-0. About 25 minutes in, we got shell shocked, and I think we were just bit mentally fatigued from the week and the expectation. And so it was really good being able to do it another time with the Roosters, and being sort of the favourites and taking the week a lot more sort of calmer and enjoying it for what it was. But I'll never forget. Robbo was always great for speeches, pre-game speeches. He's just got away with the words, Robbo. I remember in the 2013 grand final, we sat at the Pullman. A lot of the boys were all like, okay, we're all in the team meeting, and Robbo walks in, and we're like, okay, here we go, like, this is gonna be a good epic one. And he walks in the room and goes, how's everyone feeling? We all looked around, we're like, good. And he goes, righto, let's go win a grand final, and walk out of the room. And that was it. We walked over to the thing, and we all sort of looked around going like, wow, like, what was that? Just short and sharp. And I had a retirement party out here. I'd been bussing to ask Robbo what was that about. And then when I retired, Robbo came out here and I had a beer with him around the fire here. And I asked him, I said, like, what was you thinking behind there? And he said, the whole week you've been using nervous energy, and it was sort of like I didn't want to use any more. You sort of, every time you think about the game, you're using that nervous energy up, and it was about preserving it then. And he goes, I also wanted you to know that it's in your hands now. It's nothing I can say or do. You're here. It's your time now. So it was sort of, that was his thinking behind it, because nothing ever happens without deep thought with Robbo. He's a very
100%.
Articulate. But I just wondered, like, what was the thought process behind that? But it was about preserving our nervous energy, and also letting us know that this is your time now. There's nothing I can do. You've got yourself here, or we've got you here. Now it's over to you. So it was a pretty powerful moment. And we went on to win, thankfully.
It must have been powerful because your memories are so vivid. Like you remember real hard times, or you remember fun times. There's a lot of fun times I'm sure we could talk about, or you remember moments like that that were really powerful to you. Mate, after the Roosters, I mean, we could talk so much about the Roosters. I currently work for the Roosters, so you know what I think of the place and the people there. I always talk about Arnie Kath in these episodes. But let's just go all the way now. Like you went, after Roosters, you went Gold Coast, you went Cronulla, but you were trying to get overseas. What was that like playing in England? Because there's a lot of players that just play here alone, and maybe are they missing an experience? Like, what was it like? Why did you want to go overseas?
Yeah, well, Dad finished his career. He had 1 year at Hull KR at the end of his career, and made some lifelong friends. And,
there you go.
And growing up, I always thought the amount of time he spent talking about it, I thought he must have had 5 or 6 years there, but he only had 1 season.
Right.
And obviously it made a big impact on him. So it was always in the back of my mind to finish up there and experience it, because he had such good memories of the place, so and his experience. So 2017. So I'd just come off a hamstring reattachment, a rupture. And so I had a bit of a bad run with injuries in 16, 17 particularly. I had a broken wrist, MCL, hamstring rupture. So I was trying to get enough time in the NRL to get overseas, basically. So Cronulla gave me a chance. I played 2 games there, and then signed with Leeds Centurions, who were an old, very old club. They all are, but really small town, but just very passionate people. Very, very enjoyable time. You'd walk down to the little pubs of the town, and they're all just mad. It's just rugby league mad. So it was really, really enjoyable experience. We didn't have the best year, so I went over there just for the finals and ended up rupturing my bicep. I cut about 6 games in. So then after that, the club was relegated to the championship side. There was an option to come home, but I decided to stay over there and help them fight for another place back up to Super League. So had a second season there.
Did they get back up?
They did eventually, yeah. Not the second year though, but
I remember they were going up and down. And they are it is a great little town, a great little old mining town. My family, I have family history from that town that we're talking about now. So the Leeds Centurions, I have have a little connection with you there that, believe it or not, is like really deep within me as well. That even now, like I watch them. They had some success with the Challenge Cup last year. They won the Challenge Cup.
Yeah, Lee Leopards now.
Yeah, Lee Leopards. Adrian Lamb was coaching them. So
great job.
I actually grew up following the English team, Wigan.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd always get up, watch Wigan in the Challenge Cup finals. They had a cracker against Hull one year. Wigan was the team I followed, but Lee was my family's team. Yeah. So there's a lot of history there. Little old mining town. That's an experience that I've spoken to a couple of people on these podcasts where they've finished their career in England and loved it.
Yeah.
Like they just love it. Or France, you know?
Yeah. No, it was really enjoyable. The people, just a really different experience. And I'd just been married, so my wife and I just went over and, we didn't bring a cent home, but we went over and enjoyed ourselves for 2 seasons. And I talk very fondly of it. And there's it's a good competition. There's NRL's no doubt the pinnacle, but there's a lot of like any footy. There's a lot of passionate people. Wherever there's passionate people around the game, it's enjoyable.
Were you there when Fui went over?
I crossed paths with Fui. I moved into Fui's house.
Oh, okay.
So he just signed, I think, working. I think he's still there, playing for one of the teams. But so he just left, and I moved into the house he was left, and he didn't clean anything, of course.
Of course, I visited him at that house. Yeah, I think he went to Toronto first.
Yes,
and
correct.
Then came back. Well, there you go, mate. In and amongst this chat, you've hinted that there was a couple of tough times.
Yeah,
like it's not all rosy.
No.
Professional sport, like even when you were nearly making it, like it was still hard. You said there's all these, you mentioned earlier where there's all these kids getting signed and you weren't, or then you mentioned that time there where you could have gone Bulldogs but were loyal to Para, but then Para didn't want you. You've mentioned some injuries, talk us through a couple of tough times, but also just maybe some lessons, because there are going to be a lot of listeners that go through the same. Yeah,
well, there's no doubt there was the lowest period of my career. It's 2011 under Steve Kearney. As I mentioned before, he made it clear that his plans were elsewhere, which is fine. And then I went back and played for Wentworthville, and I was busting my butt there to try to get a start, because I was still only 21 and learned some pretty hard lessons. I was 22, I think, at that stage. And there was a few injuries in first grade late in the year, and I was sort of thinking, okay, well, here's my shot. I'm going to at least finish on a high and play some footy. And
I'm back.
I'm back in. I think Jeff Robson and Casey Maguire were in, and I'm sort of looking and going, there's no one else here. Like, it's got to be me. And then the following week, Steve Kearney had named Filetti at 6 and Luke Burt from the wing into halfback, and that was sort of a real kick in the guts.
Yeah.
And it was sort of a bit of a sign, okay, I need to move on. I need to swallow it and bury it, unfortunately, because I love the club and you only ever want to be a one club player, so I would have loved to stay at that club long term. But there's signs like that you think, okay, well, it's my time up here is done. So there was a really tough sort of few moments. That was probably the lowest of my career. But my manager looked around, and thankfully, things happen, and I got signed with the Roosters and came out with a premiership. So sometimes when you are darkest, and it gets told 1,000 different ways, but you just don't know what's around the corner. And if that hadn't happened, I might have stuck around Para and tried to stick it out in reserve grade for another number of years. But
thanks, Luke Burt, if you're listening.
Yeah, thanks, Steve Kearney. Yeah, one of those things. It was a really. I still remember it. Now the feeling, and it was
really.
I was losing sleep. I was antisocial. It was tough, and I was only 22 years old. So I was always a positive, sprightly young lad. But my family that could see that I was pretty broken at that stage.
Who helped you through that? There's some losing sleep.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, my uncle's got a really good relationship with Johnny Lewis.
Right.
And I used to go boxing with Johnny Lewis on Saturday mornings. Just through that period, he said he'd come out, so I'd go meet him. The famous boxing coach. I'm sure you would have crossed paths with Johnny Lewis. Yeah. and just one of those guys who, older guy and little old fella that's boxed or coached some of the greats. And he just said, mate, come out, have an hour with me and we'll just chat and have a bit of a box. And it was great. It broke up my week and got me smiling again for a little while. And,
awesome.
And then, so just leaning on good people around me. And then got through that period, signed with Roosters with a new lease on life. And once again, the memories that I have and relationships from the Roosters are still last to this day and some of my most treasured memories. So, that was a really, really tough period, but without that, I wouldn't have probably had my best memory, which is winning the grand final in 2013. So, all happened because of that. So, it was a lesson, and I learned it a few times through my life, through tough times. Is like just I think being optimistic is just the biggest thing. I think just thinking, well, something's good going to happen. Being more optimistic just even makes the journey, even if it doesn't happen, it makes the journey more enjoyable because you got positive thoughts and you're thinking, oh, this could happen. Let's go hard and see if it does. And even that journey is a lot more enjoyable.
Without a doubt, the best across every industry are optimistic. It's a skill that if you don't have it, you need to learn it and practice it. But mate, that's some great advice of having lived it. Can we go to the business side now and go what was the journey into that and where we sit now? You're running Mortimer's Wines with your mum and dad.
Yep.
And when we're talking about optimistic, what can you see happening in this space? Because I arrived here today and you were out walking through the vines and picking things off the tree. Yeah. What were you doing?
Desuckering. Yeah. Just pulling the shoots off the trunk.
Pulling the shoots off the trunk, yeah. And you had all your work gear on and you were dirty and working away, and now in this beautiful showroom where you actually host people in here yourself. Optimistically, what can you see? Is this going to be one of those huge wineries that will see a brand all around the world, or is it just going to stay as a little boutique little winery out here in Orange?
No, well, we love where we sit at the moment. The reason why we love what we do, but two, the quality of the wine's so good is because we're on it. Like you saw today, like Dad and I are on the vineyard nearly daily, and you take a bit more pride when your last name's on a bottle. It's a reflection of you, and this wine really is a reflection of us. Because I was 6 years old when we planted the vines, so there's been a lot of time and effort, but a lot of pride that goes into it too. And there's no better feeling than welcoming people into this beautiful old school house, our cellar door, and pouring them a glass of wine that you helped plant when you were 6 and you still work. So, it's a fascinating industry, and it's farming. It's a lot of great people in the industry, and there's a lot of different farming, but not many other farms you can sit down and enjoy a glass of your product at the end of the day. So it's a really rewarding experience. It's a lot of work, and my brothers and I all grew up working pretty damn hard on the winery, but it gave us so many skills that we use, and a lot of the reason why I probably had a successful NRL career was those lessons learnt on the vineyard. Those discipline and those hard-working hours and getting out what you put in, it's all relative, and that's why a lot of players make successful business people, because it's those character traits you learned of you getting out what you put in.
That's a great angle. Recently I've done an episode with Wes Mars, who it's a great story. Don't know if you followed it or listened. Wes talked about his time at Paramount as well, and then he took a lot of lessons from Rugby League and has put it into the Mars Group, who now employs 2,000 people and is worth $1.6 billion.
Yeah, I did see clips of that one, yeah.
Yeah. So he talks about lessons from Rugby League that he took to business. Tim Manor talked about lessons from Rugby League that he's taken into business. You've just talked about lessons from working these vines
into Rugby League.
Yeah, that's great. I love that angle. I love that angle.
Yeah.
Like you've had influences, hard-working influences that you took into rugby league. But then, is there anything you've learned about team sports that you now bring into your business, like those guys had? Is there anything you learnt, whether it been at the Roosters or being with certain people? Is there anything you've learnt from rugby league or team environments that you can bring to this business?
Yeah, well, I think the leadership. I lead a small team here now of pickers or cellador staff, and it's a lot smaller than Wes Mar, but it's still about that, creating an environment where people are happy and they're challenged and they can buy into your goal. And we have some great staff, 2 great staff in particular who work here on weekends to help us serve, and you'd think that they were Mortimers, long lost Mortimers, because of the passion they talk about our brand with. That doesn't happen overnight, and it's not an easy thing to instill in employees. But I sit there, Dad and I sit there really proud when we look at our staff and talk about our wines with the pride that they have in our wines. It makes you really proud of the environment you've created. And once again, I can relate that straight to a couple of the teams, successful teams that I've been part of in that, particularly second half of 2009. That group which just we just lived and breathed it and got on together. And then obviously the Roosters 2013, they were happy environments where everyone bought into the goal.
Happy. You just mentioned your happy staff, happy players. There's some gold in that. There's some gold in that message there for people, whether they're trying to coach a sporting team or run a business. That environment you've created, and you mentioned in the successful teams you felt it.
Yeah.
I've often said this on some talks or here where I believe that culture wins. Good culture. Everyone's got a culture, but the good ones win, and the poor ones don't.
Yeah.
And I say that with 100% belief because I've been a part of both.
Yeah.
Been in the real, like you've just said, you remember those successful ones, the passion in the team, the buy-in, everyone happy, everyone in the one direction. I really enjoyed listening to that, and I'd love to even talk to your dad about that, because if I just try to compare what I've seen here and what I remember of you. First impression when you walk in here is top class. First impression when I drink this wine. But I think of you as a footy player. The first impression we had of you was class. Like, he's going to play first grade. And then I think about the hard work. You've just told me you planted these vines when you were 6 and you worked your whole life. So I'm starting to see things. And then I think about the passion. Like you mentioned people's passion that work for you and your product. When I used to watch you train and play, the passion you had was for the game was really evident. But now we've sat in, you've shared it with me that you had it from when you were 1-2 years old, So it's been so enjoyable chatting to you, mate.
Yeah, pleasure. It's been nice to have you back.
I've loved coming out here. So we're going to switch this camera off and we're going to finish a drink of this. What are we on here? The Shiraz.
Shiraz, mate.
Thank you, mate. But really appreciate it, mate. You've delivered some gold there for the people listening, and it's just been great to catch up.
Pleasure, mate. It's been good to have you back.
Legend.
Thanks, mate.
Ah.